Welcome to another awesome day of FileMaker training. I am Richard Carlton. Actually, change angle. And then moving over here. Welcome everyone to another awesome day of FileMaker training at fmtrain.tv. If you go to fmtrain.tv, you can see all the cool things that we're doing. We do live training at 1 o'clock Pacific time every day, right? And so this is the upcoming broadcast schedule today. And tomorrow we're doing PowerShell and kind of a similar sort of thing with shell scripting on the Mac. The idea is to kind of extend mostly the FileMaker server to do additional things that you might need it to do that out of the box it doesn't want to do. And a talented IT professional will dip into PowerShell to give them additional capabilities. It's pretty interesting stuff. So it's 2 days of kind of technology that supports FileMaker and how we use it with FileMaker, not necessarily FileMaker product itself, at least for the next 2 days. Then Thursday and Friday are an interesting conversation. It's two conversations coming from two different angles by two different people, and talking about basically, from my loose interpretation, basically the serialization of code within the FileMaker platform. Something that's not final yet, it's in progress. We've already had webinars on this covering, different uses of this technology, but it's the idea that you could take a FileMaker solution and essentially turn it into, export a solution out as code, like lines of code. And because it comes out purely as code, you can munge it and change it and do stuff with it and then suck it back in. The technology is not final yet, right? So we've had webinars, we've done them previously. We talk about the emergency Star Trek transporter. That's the basic same kind of technology. There's a million uses of this technology, but the problem is it's not been finalized by Claris. It's not certified. It's kind of like a Star Trek transporter that you beam people off. Sometimes it kills them. Sometimes you're missing an ear or a finger or something like that. So you don't really want to use it until it's final, or if you're just testing with it, it's fine, or playing with it. And so Christian Olsen, Kyle Williams, both people who most of you know, these are great people. They are using this technology kind of for different means, but to help the developer. And so it's not like one's better than the other. They're different, but it's their own separate interpretations of what they could do with this technology, which is pretty interesting. So that's the upcoming broadcast schedule. This is all free training here at fmtraining.tv, where we broadcast on high definition to YouTube, Twitch, and Discord. So you can find one of those that you'd like to watch. If you come over here, you can watch this button right here. It'll allow you to watch it in YouTube in real time, Twitch in real time, then Discord. If you're interested in a Discord invite, go over here to where Michael or Michelle or Wally are already there from Netherlands and Montreal. The people are already there on YouTube. If you want to watch us in Discord, you can do that as well. Keep in mind, it's about a 90-second delay between when we broadcast something and you see it on YouTube or Twitch. If you're on Discord, it's almost real time, which is kind of crazy. To support the channel and to show your appreciation of all the live streams, we highly recommend that you check out our training courses. These are what we call on demand, i.e., this is Jacob Taylor. He is basically he likes to call himself the high head of information technology at RCC, but basically he's the god of server architecture. I that's kind of better title. You should put on your business card, God of server architecture. But he is pretty amazing. What, you okay with that?
That's a little spicier than the one I went with, but I'll take it.
So what are we doing? We're on Windows. Okay, so let's back up to basics, like for people who don't know. What is PowerShell and what application am I in? And start from the beginning.
So back, we'll say it was just back in the day, and people who remember older versions of Windows, they came with the command line, and I could even open that up and show you. It's the lovely little black. Oh, come on, give me my thing. There we go. Sorry. There we go. Okay, so y'all remember the lovely black box from back when. Within this, you can run batch scripts. That's like the old school way to automate things in Windows. There's other scripting languages that have come through over the years, but that one's been in there like since the early days, since the 90s. And it's a set of commands. You can say, all right, I want to do this, do that, do the next thing, etc. And it's very basic programming features, like very, very basic. Like it can't do an amazing amount. It's only simple operations. So as we moved up in time, Microsoft at some point basically made the decision that they should have something that's a little more powerful for scripting things on Windows. And scripting things, I'm kind of putting in air quotes here because I'm not explaining what that means, but you can think of it as, I can prepare an operation for the computer, and then it can do it. And so there's lots of different kinds of scripting languages. That's a really bad but really generic definition of what a scripting language is. There are lots of them. Python technically is a scripting language, if you've heard of that one. Even PHP, which runs lots of people's websites.
What about FileMaker? FileMaker has scripts, and it tells
FileMaker has script,
and it tells it what to do. So is that kind of thing?
You would probably use that description of specifically the script language in FileMaker itself, but not the total, like FileMaker with the databases and the calc engine and this stuff. You wouldn't describe the rest of it, but you could say that FileMaker has a scripting language, which is FileMaker script. So then we have kind of batch scripts, which use their own. I don't know what the language, if there's a name for that. Actually, that's a good. So it's a good question. But then later, basically, we have PowerShell. So PowerShell is kind of the modern version. I actually like it. I'm not like amazing at it or something. I don't know if I'm the best person to teach all of this stuff, but one of the reasons that I really like it is because a lot of things in PowerShell are I actually think of them, if any of you have played Skyrim, they're like shouts in that video game. You shout something at the computer and it makes it happen. And that's how a lot of the commands are. So actually one of the ones I was going to do an example of is, for example, just to like get the current date on the computer, like what time and day and whatever is it. And that's literally get date. And so lots of things are like that. Like it's an affirmative statement. Like I'm going to get the date. I'm going to get this thing. I'm going to set this setting. And so like built out PowerShell scripts look like a long list of I'm shouting at the computer each command, shout, 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 shout. And by the end of it, you've got this thing that whatever you're trying to do. So we've brought up a couple of examples today. The two that I brought forth are actually the two most used at RCC currently. One is our backup system for Windows computers, which is almost but not entirely in PowerShell. Oh yeah, let me switch windows so I'm talking about this. And then the second thing, and I think I've mentioned this on stream a couple times, so for you all who've been here and are return people, you might remember I've talked about a metrics collection system that I built for our Windows FileMaker servers. We can show that as well. And both of them are good examples of kind of how shouty, how I'm commanding the computer to do things and it's complying with me, the programming languages. So.
All right, cool. You're good. So show us the shouting. So is PowerShell is that the scripting language, or is that the app that we build the script in? What is PowerShell?
It's yes and yes. So okay. PowerShell is both the name of the language. If you're going to run PowerShell on a computer, you'll be doing it in PowerShell. In general, people are actually referring to this thing when they're talking about that. Yes, this looks just like a command line, except it's blue instead of black. But that means that you're inside of the PowerShell command prompt and inside of the PowerShell environment. So I can this looks like a command line, right? But I can get date, and that's in PowerShell they're called commandlets.
So that's like I've not played Skyrim, but obviously Megan knows what that is. So we're shouting at the computer, "Get date!" Is that what we did? Right?
Yeah, correct. Okay. And then and it produced for us the date. David Angel asks if it's only for Windows. I don't know if they've ported it or if it works well on Linux. But what I can tell you is they are actually working on PowerShell running on other operating systems. So no, I don't believe it. If it's currently only runs on Windows, it's only because they haven't finished working the bugs out of the other versions. They're trying to make PowerShell kind of a more generic runtime and like beef it out as a programming language in general. Because a lot of the initial stuff, 100%, it's basically Windows specific. But there's a thing that you can do with It's not specific to scripting languages or anything else, but if you try and take your thing that you've built, your piece of software, and bring it to other computers and operating systems, you'll find cool features that you can bring those back to Windows from Linux or stuff like that, and get a little interchange that's nice. But in general, at this point, it's kind of Windows only.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
they're working on the alternatives. So
That's fine. Tomorrow we're going to talk about shell script on the Mac, which is loosely from our needs going to do the same thing. So
yeah, and that technically covers both like Mac and Linux. It's slightly different between the two, but not enough to matter. So
all right, so walk us through this. So this is totally a Microsoft construct, is what we're saying at this point.
pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
They wrote the language, they wrote the program that the language runs in. It's like anything else. You have a script, which is just a text file, and then you have the thing that it runs in, the execution environment, if you will, and that is very similar to something like Python or PHP or any of these other, even Bash actually, which we're going to cover tomorrow. It's the same sort of thing. There's a text file that has all of your commands, your code, if you will, in it, and then you have some sort of environment that you're going to run this stuff in. We getting the date and whatever, that's kind of a basic example. But the thing that we're actually looking at right now is the backup system that's in fact running on our development server. And this is, I'll say, like the latest version of it, because I actually develop most of the improvements to this stuff running on the server. And so, if you add features or change stuff or whatever and it never blows up, then it's probably working reasonably well. And so we can kind of step through a couple parts of this, to kind of explain stuff.
Yeah. I think we've got plenty of time. So the first thing, and Larry's not here. I was going to use Larry as a reference, but imagine you're a FileMaker person and you don't know anything else, and so I see $. That means to me a local variable that doesn't live beyond anything else. So is that kind of what that is?
Correct. Yeah. So those are assigns. Those are assignments. So in this case, so like we ran it earlier on the command line, we did our get date, right? And this, if you just run it, it spits the date out for you because you asked for it. But over here, we're going to keep that. And so we're going to say if we need to, I actually think the script doesn't use the date. That's one of the things I've been meaning to clean up for a while. But we are capturing the date, and then you could theoretically use it later. So for example, if you were going to write out backup files that have the date in the file name, for example, like when the backup was generated, there you go, right? You can capture that and then reuse it later. One of the neat things about PowerShell is, it has basic stuff. So you can see kind of what like copy item is. It's what it sounds like. It's a file, copying files or something like that. And remove items, same thing. If you want to delete a file, it's similar concept. And so that's kind of like a basic operation here, or moving something. That's another one of the lines. But one of the cool things that you can do that is Windows specific, actually, that is why this is beneficial, is lines like this one here at the top. So, oops, there we go. I was trying to highlight that. There we go. So if you have like the host name, you want to pull that out. So for example, what we do is the backups go into a folder named after the server. So in case you had multiple or something like that, you have server 1, server 2, and server 3. You put that in the Windows settings, like you've named the Windows computer that my company's S1 or something, whatever, right? You have some naming for it. Then you can put that into the backup folder. You could put it into the file name, something like that. And that's actually what we do. So,
Cool.
And then stepping through this, so our next line is, it's copy item. So we're going to copy stuff, whatever, files, whatever's in there. We have a starting path, which is, oops, and then this thing's dragging around. Hold on, there we go. So our path is like, where are we copying things from? And then our destination is, where are we copying things to? And then the last thing is recurse, and that means get everything. And it's recursed through the directories. So what this will actually do is, you see it's, program files, FileMaker server logs. Y'all can probably tell what is in that folder based on what it's named. But what this will do is, for example, 360 Works plugin actually will make like if you have it if you have 360works email installed inside of FileMaker Server as a server-side plugin, it has a little log file that it generates. And this will, but it's not in the logs folder. It's in its own, to say 360works. I forget what the word is. It's FM server, and then there's Web64 and stuff like that. But they put their logs inside of a subfolder. Basically, this will grab everything. So anything that's in that logs directory at all, whatever, it doesn't matter, it gets pulled. So, and then what these do, like on a strategy level, I'll explain the code really quick, and then kind of why we do it. So what this does is, so you see we have our temporary file, and then our final version of the file down here, which is like you have a starting name and then a final one. Okay, so basically what test path does is basically it'll be this thing. So if you hand it a folder, a file name, something like that, it'll tell you if it exists. And it doesn't do anything cool. There's probably command line arguments that you could do that would be cooler. But the way that we're using it, it's very simple. It's just, here's this final zip here, which is E backups, and then there's a file named backup zip.7zip. Okay. If that file exists, then this runs, i.e. we will delete the backup. So the reason that this happens at the beginning of the backup process is because otherwise you would need to have both the final zip and the temporary zip like live at the same time on the system. And so then you have to have space for two backups. And so if you delete the old one that you're going to make a new one just now anyway, beforehand, then it doesn't require as much space to continue to operate. And so on a more kind of strategic level for backups for a server, it makes them significantly more reliable, because if you get into a situation where there's not quite enough backup, room for backups on the server, but it's not quite enough, but there's just enough, it'll continue to operate until there really well and truly is not enough space remaining. And so if your database or your data set size doesn't change significantly over time, then you can get really close to the high water line of the backup drive, and the backups will continue to work without issue.
Okay, so real quick, so if DeCinco is on Twitch, and I want to encourage people to ask questions. He didn't really ask a question, but I want to explore this because there's always more than one way. It's kind of an old slang term, and it's not really great. But the more than one way to skin a cat.
Path. Correct.
Yeah. And so DeCinco saying this is perfect timing, setting up PowerShell to pick up a file out of an FTP site to import into FMP. And when someone comes to me and says FTP into FileMaker, you can take it to the bank that Monkey Bread will probably do that. And then there's probably, I know 360works is another vendor that we support. They have an FTP sucker-upper program, I'm sure. So if someone came to you and said, hey, I would want to do this FTP import into FileMaker, or save out a CSV and then send it to FTP, Jacob Taylor, as a architectural engineer, how would you solve that, you think? What method?
We have clients that do it two different ways. I'd have to think about that. I actually, the one client I have that their system works that way already, it is frankly actually a source of problems, because theirs is a server-side scheduled script, which would otherwise perfectly meet their requirements actually. Because we programmed it, and it goes to the FTP server, and it pulls down all the data. But that's if it works correctly. And so it's kind of back to the issues of scheduled scripts on servers and the ways that they can fail or stop working.
Listen, we got tons of time. Let's walk through this. I guarantee half the people here need to know about this right now, and the other half will need to know about it in a month. So, so what is the issue? How are you solving it? And without getting into details of the customer, we don't really care.
Yeah. So the in that particular customer, actually, we think it may be damage inside the file or something like that. It's a long-term project, but at some point they're gonna get their file recovered and stuff like that, because we ran one on the backup and think that that's actually why theirs is failing. But in general, like if that issue didn't exist, basically what they have is a process. So they have records in their database that have because they have multiple data providers that they're downloading stuff from. So they have records in their database that are the kind of the server details. So like the FTP server address, username, password, keys if they're using that for logins, etc. And so you can just kind of step through that. And there's two ways. They actually use a combination of Monkey Bread and the FileMaker insert from URL. And we use FileMaker insert from URL script step to fetch the list of files that we need to download. And then we come back later with Monkey Bread and use that to actually download the files. And basically the reason for doing it that way is because they're the kind of feedback and debugging information that you can get from Monkey Bread is really, really, really helpful whenever there's some kind of a problem. And so we actually built their system so that like every time it runs, the full debug logging of Monkey Bread is put into a field that is associated with each individual file being downloaded. So if there's ever an issue, we can go back and I can go tell you what went wrong, because Monkey Bread actually, it's the same for actually the insert from URL script step, but it's a little harder to get access to the data. You can tell Monkey Bread, hey, give me all the debugging data from curl, which is what it's actually using under the hood. And curl, if you tell it to scream at a level of 11, you're going to get a lot of information back. Some of it's useful, some of it not. But we can save all of that. And so if I need to go back and say, oh man, that transfer failed on blah, blah, blah date, we can usually go back and track down either what happened or confirm, yep, something blew up and it totally failed. And, we either don't know why or whatever.
But. Yeah, I really like what you're doing. I have a question. What is when theirs fails, what is the symptoms of their fail, just out of curiosity? I mean, I know you're thinking that you have like some sort of catastrophic database error in their file, right? But
yeah, we think there might be damage. Basically, the scheduled script runs. Theirs is scheduled to run ballpark every 20 minutes during business hours. And it will run and it will, we'll say, get to the end or get to somewhere in the process, and you'll never see a log line from that scripted process again. It never ends. You never see that it ended. It also never runs again. It's never scheduled to run again. And this doesn't affect PSOS or any of the other stuff on the server. It's just that particular script stops. Stops running, stops responding, stops.
So, but the script. So, does the script schedule try to run it again and it fails, or just?
Nope. You never hear from it again. It just falls off a cliff.
Yeah, but the script is a separate process than the server trying to run the script. So somehow the two are
it gets totally hooked. Yeah.
Yeah, are totally in cahoots together, and it's failed, but it hasn't. It's not like it's released. So because at the end of it, it would schedule its next time to run. So does it think
and that never happens?
Does it think
it thinks it's still running, but it also never kills it, even though there's a kill it after a certain time period. Like we have that set up too. So I've been working with Claris on it because I think there may be an issue. Like I think there may be a bug in the product. They are pointing at potential corruption in the file. We're going to resolve the corruption basically, and then see if the bug continues to exist. If it doesn't, maybe that was what was causing it. If it does, then that timeout that's supposed to kill the process after some time period, maybe there is potentially actually an issue with that nuclear or whatever.
Yeah, what's I mean, chasing bugs like that can be very infuriating, and having a good log is very, very infuriating. But this gets back to something I talk about, and in this case, you're probably not hosing yourself too badly, but we talk about robots and why we like robots. And we like robots because if you give something to the server to do and it chokes on it, then bad juju. It's bad. It's bad, bad. And so it no longer runs at all. Does it damage any other processor, or is it just limited to its own little spot?
No, just that one script.
You're very lucky. How do you restore it? Do you have to restart the whole server to restore it?
Yeah, he reboots it once a week.
Okay. Yeah. So if it was running on a robot, if it was running on a robot and the robot died, you could restart the robot, and it wouldn't affect the server, right? This is we're back to this whole idea of why you might want to have a robot machine that's either in your office or on the Amazon rack next to the server, wherever it's at, because that way when it blows into little tiny bits, it doesn't take the server with it. In his case, the server is sufficiently damaged that to restore service, he must restart the server, which means kicking people off the server, et cetera, et cetera. So that's interesting. That's interesting. So, yeah, once again, why we do what we do, we say what we say, we eat our own dog food. Whenever we do that, Margaret, we need barking noises, right? Little dogs eating the dog food, so yes. All right, so
not exactly good at that. Sorry.
All right, I'll bark for everyone. Woof. All right, so other questions we have. DeCinco says, I have it working locally, but I need to tweak the PowerShell. So DeCinco's playing with this FTP thing, right? I think.
Oh, he's gonna do it in PowerShell. So I wouldn't object to that generally. The advice I would give to DeCinco, sorry, I'm not on Twitch, so I can't see the name. Would basically be to make sure that you're keeping logs of whatever your script is that runs somewhere, wherever you want to keep logs, that's up to you. But so that you can go back and check it if something fails, or if somebody, you get a screaming call that, hey, my data hasn't been brought in a month, and you can go figure out what was up. If something fell over or whatever. DeSkinco. Oh, there it is. Need it to work on the server. I have an issue getting a server to server connection. Okay. Yeah. If you're talking to a kind of standard REST API in PowerShell, super new versions of PowerShell have some, there's a couple built-in commands specifically for talking to REST stuff. I don't know how nice PowerShell is for talking to other stuff. I frankly have found the programming actually for network communication on PowerShell, unless you're talking to over a Windows file share or something like that, I found it to be slightly painful. But that's kind of true of a lot of the programming languages that I've used.
What about the Monkey Bread? So that's Monkey Bread easier for that, or
it's in FileMaker, so if you're already very comfortable with that, yeah, it's an approachable way to do it.
Okay, so we're gonna give Christian Schmidt a pass for taking a month off if his product's good. Is that what we're saying? All right.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, you're allowed to take a month off, Christian.
And so the next thing like I said, we clear out these backups, basically the old ones, the ones that were generated last time, we cleared them out. This line that I have highlighted here, although now it's no, you need to highlight it. There you go. That line kind of also does what it looks like. One of the reasons I like PowerShell is because it's kind of straightforward. You can tell I'm running 7-zip there. 7-zip is a very popular and common command line utility that will zip things, as you might have guessed from the name. And so we pass a couple of options here. So we're going to add all the files. This is telling it what kind of zipping to use. There's a whole bunch of different kinds. This thing tells it how many processor cores, if they're available. And then this is how, oops, I keep doing that. And the MX0 is how much to compress it. The 0 is what it sounds like, which is don't compress it. And then you have your temporary zip file, which is where we're going to put it. And then the final thing is, what are we zipping? And this data folder on all of our servers is actually linked to, that's not what's in the data folder, but there's a folder in the data folder named FileMaker that links to the most recent backup of the database, basically.
But you're targeting that entire directory is what you're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. And so what it does is it pulls everything in, and so each step runs. There's no asynchronous stuff where something runs and it jumps onto the next line or whatever. It will not get to this line 15 move item that you see here. It won't get to that until the zip has completed, if that means crashed or completed successfully or whatever it's going to do. It doesn't actually care about that part of it, but 7-zip has to have exited somehow for it to move on. So basically, if you are running the move item, which moves the temp file to the final one, and then the way that our scripts work is we basically just call it, right folder, drive, and then that's primary, and then secondary is the one below it. And so that's if we need zipped up copies of the database on multiple hard drives on the computer. That's less amazing in AWS, but we use this same scripting system for example, customer on-site servers. And for them, actually, having multiple copies on different hard drives is a fantastic idea because often one of them will be, a storage server somewhere or a NAS, and then you have one that's on that, it's actually the local hard drive, and then if you have another one that'll, like this one goes to S3, you could do that on an on-site server, actually. Obviously, you're going to be uploading all that data, so your internet needs to be fast enough, but, those sorts of considerations aside, you can do all of those things. And so all we do is we say, hey, backup that goes to the primary drive, here you go, here's the zip file. Storage, here you go. And this isn't like I'm handing the file to the script. I am calling, for example, the S3 script, and I'm telling the S3 script there's this other piece of information that comes with it, and that's up here, that's this path, and that's all. It's like this as a string. You're saying, hey, here's another thing, and then if you go into the S3 storage file, one of the first things that we do is we get this right here, which is what is the file, which you passed an item to us on the command line, an argument, if you will. What is that? And so it gets it, and then that is used elsewhere, later. Hey, Amazon S3, we're going to come talk to you and say hi, and upload this, database copy. This is the most recent hourly that we're doing right now. Okay. And so you just hand that file in chunks to Amazon. So.
Okay, so David asked a question. I don't know if you were answering this question or not. Did you answer his question about why do you create a $temp.zip? It's in Discord there. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you might think that you would want to just generate the one file and then upload that one directly immediately afterwards or something like that, because that's an extra step that could fail. It's going to fail anyway. One of the benefits that actually doing a move gets you is, for example, that will error out if the file doesn't exist. For example, if the zip crashed or didn't complete yet or stuff like that, that file will not be there yet.
Okay, so this is basically forcing extra verbose logging lines, which it helps us with our telemetry. Is that what you're saying?
Yep. Basically,
yes. See that?
Yeah.
So it's stupid. It's
unnecessary.
unnecessary.
You're totally correct to say that it's not strictly necessary, but that doesn't mean it's not helpful. And also, a move of a single file on Windows, which is all this is, it's a quick rename. That's an instant operation, and if it fails, that'll tell us things like there's some kind of weird permission issue. Horrifying things like the drive filled in between the first and the zip and the second part of this or something like that, and so it's diagnostic for other reasons.
David, do you understand how awesome this learning moment? I learned something from that, and I loved learning, and so Jacob, thank you. But yes, that it forces that telemetry. Basically, it's when anything blows up in NASA, they always have there we go, right? It's like, getting smarter by the moment, right? Yeah, so that's why we do these, right? Every day, because there's always something new. And maybe Kyle already knew this. Kyle's brilliant, but I didn't know that. That's good. That's a great idea. FileMaker generally, as a platform, sucks for logging. So it's not too helpful there. But if you're doing other, what we call, this is in the world of low code, no code. This is the pro code part of the conversation. It's part of the conversation I've been having with Claris about pro code and them kind of trying to promote the idea of pro code. We are pro coding here, right? So, and there's
there we go.
Tips and tricks for making it better and getting good telemetry logging is useful. What do you got? What are you showing us here? What is this?
I think that's the one that I want. Let's see. No. All right. Is this the one? So this is this the, I think this is the one I'm looking for. Yes, it is. All right, cool. So I wanted to pull this up. So this is a thing that you can do in PowerShell for the person working on correct. Sorry, I was correct for Christian Schmidt in Discord. So one of the cool things about PowerShell that it's not a PowerShell thing necessarily. It's just a feature that I found out about kind of recently that I really, really, really like. And this is a demo of it. So one of the things that you can do in PowerShell is so like a lot of other programming languages, FileMaker's included, if you need logging, you have to write logging routines, or you need to integrate a logging library into your application that, writes out a text file, sends it to Windows Event Viewer or whatever, right? Like wherever it's going to go, wherever you're going to collect those logs. Or shoot, if you're out in regular old IT, there's all kinds of log ingest companies, and they'll keep your logs for you, and then you can go do incident response using that stuff after the fact. Awesome. Awesome, literally awesome, great. But one of the things that you can do that's built directly into PowerShell are called transcripts. This is one of them. So what this transcript is that we're looking at, and I kind of identified it because it was slightly larger than the rest of them. This is the last time that our backup script ran this hour, it's a little larger than the rest of them, which is how I could tell. This one actually, which is gigantic, is from when I started this script in prep for this demo. And I can, if you guys care, I can explain that later. But the short version is what this does is you can do, so I have it turned on globally. So literally any PowerShell, end of the sentence, any PowerShell running on this development server will create a log. I didn't have to program that anywhere. I don't have to tell PowerShell, start a transcript, stop a transcript. You can do that. I think that's the exact commands actually. It's start transcript and stop, or maybe it's end transcript or something like that. But you can do that. So you can say, I want a transcript for this section because I want super verbose logging for, maybe the dude that's writing his automation that's going to go talk to the FTP server. He wants to go in there and, you don't care too much about the startup of the script or something like that. But once you get to the network communication part, that's really, maybe that's really important to keep track of. So you could transcript just that section of it or something. So you can do that in PowerShell. What we have done is I turned it on for literally everything. There's like a Windows registry key where you can say, all right, if PowerShell runs, take a log, take a transcript, and put it in this directory. And so we have a whole folder of these things that's just transcripts. The benefit to connect the first thing that we demonstrated today and then this second thing, which I will walk through the transcript really fast. But the benefit here is these transcripts are in that data folder. And if you remember, that's the folder that we're backing up. So we actually get a copy of all of the former script runs on the server every time that backup runs. The benefit of that to us is that if the server blows up, for example, or I don't know, a meteor hits it or whatever, some weird thing happens, craziness, cool. We can go back, and when I pull that backup out of S3 to go look at it, I have a point-in-time representation of everything that happened on that server up to that point. So that's incredibly helpful. I'm not done with this stuff. I'm still kind of working out how we're going to pull logs off and prepare that stuff. That's also I'm actually showing like things that haven't been put on all of our customer servers yet. This thing is my experimentation with grabbing all the FileMaker server logs. Same thing. We're just copying them over and then they get zipped up. And so we're going to grab, that'll have the event log and the access log and stuff like that. So if anything weird's going on, we have that saved somewhere.
Perfect.
Somewhere else. So.
Okay, so you gonna walk us through the transcript real quick?
Yeah, super quick. So this is just a normal backup run.
This is all when it starts, we get this block.
This is the startup. Yeah, we get all this stuff. It's versions of everything. What's the start time? Who ran it? What command are we running? Process IDs, blah blah blah. All the little details. If you need to know any of it, it's right there. When we really get into the interesting start, so it spits out a couple more things. It's the same thing. We have additional, even more additional details. Cool. And so then we start getting into Jacob doesn't know how to program, and no, not really. But these are errors associated with that log line that's running. And so this doesn't actually matter. But these are correct. And so what they're telling us is it's trying to copy those logs over from the FileMaker server logs directory, and it's trying to copy them to a location that already exists. So that's true. And basically we don't actually care. I believe if I program this correctly, this thing, oh, it doesn't do force. So if I wanted to make this nuclear, I could add most things in PowerShell are you add force onto the end of them, basically. And that's what it sounds like. It's, oh, if you encounter errors, yeah, right, like that one right there. If you encounter an error somewhere, that's wonderful, power through it, basically. Do whatever the smartest thing would be that makes the thing I've asked you to do happen. So in this case, if I added force to it, it's going to say, well, I don't care if there's already a logs directory there. Blow the existing one up, make a new one, copy all the data over. Even if those files already existed, we're just going to overwrite them, et cetera, et cetera. So whatever would be the best, smartest way to accomplish what I've asked PowerShell to do, which is to copy these items from this location to that location, right? So
cool. What else we have on that telemetry?
Dun, dun, dun. And so that gets through. And so that, whatever, we have our little errors here. There's about 3 of them, which there's basically a couple files it checks and goes, oh, those already exist. That's correct. And then you get down to here, and this is 7-zip running, zipping up our backups directory. And so it says, all right, we scanned all the files. This is how many. This is all the files that it's backing up. So we apparently have 30,000 files. Somebody's got some external container data, it looks like, and 12 gigs of data total. It creates the archive file, which you all have seen that path before. Does that, gives us basically, this is what it expected to do, and then this is what it did. And then you have the actual number of files, which you see slightly differs. You have 30,801 and 30,791, whatever that, I don't know why that difference is, but it doesn't really matter. And then there's the compressed size, so it's actually done. And then it says, cool, gives you the thumbs up and says, everything's okay, great. And then so after this, it's output from our scripts. And this is actually the S3 one running. So that's our bucket name, basically the location in S3 where we are saving our backups for the server. And then here's, the key. That's a little bit of a misnomer because key probably doesn't make sense in this in the context. Amazon, though, when you are uploading a file into S3, that is called the file key. And so what that actually is it's like it's like that. So if that makes more sense as a file path, let me just do like, that might look a little more logical as far as like where a network location, or that's not how you note that, but just as an example for everybody, like that's what that means. here's our network path. It's this weird thing called U35 blah 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 dot backups, and then there's a folder, and our server name is dbw41c blah 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 dot backups / and then what file are we uploading? And in this case, the file's name is temp.zip, just for various reasons of how our backup system works. So.
All right, cool.
And then you get through, and it uploads all the little chunks, and that's what all these are. These are the little, each of these sections. So you see response metadata, response metadata, response metadata. Each of those is 1 gigabyte of the data going up. So, and then you're done. And then you get all the way here to the end, and we have our how long did it take, and dun, 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 that's it. So, and then I have other examples. So that's a basic thing. That's kind of how our backup system works. Let me undo the force that I added wherever that is. There it is. All right, cool. Took it off. So one of the other things we can demonstrate. So that's a basic one, right? We gather up a little bit of information about the machine. We have some keys stored various places ahead of time. And then, you use the kind of the little details, you put them all together and you upload the file to Amazon. That script puts stuff various places. So as you can see, that right S3 storage, that's the Amazon one. That's not the only one of these that's blue, i.e. not commented out. So we write a backup out to the hard drive somewhere. We actually write a second backup out to the hard drive somewhere, but in this case, it's a kind of Dropbox specific one. And so that goes into our Dropbox offsite backups, which go to one of Richard's computers in case, wild things happen. We have at least one daily backup of an entire copy of anything that was on the server, anything that was alive at the time. So.
Yep, we believe in copious use of backups. All right.
Yep.
Well, we got not a lot of time here, so I don't know how much more. We could save some of this conversation for tomorrow.
And I can this one has like a lot of lines in it, but you can kind of explain one step in each section. So this is what I mentioned previously. This is our metrics collector. Basically, at RTC, I wanted to start keeping track of like how servers are performing. Not, we're not trying to pin everything down and make everything. Oh, we have numbers every 5 seconds or something mostly it doesn't matter. It's servers don't get suddenly unhappy unless they fall over and die, or something. A momentous event happens of some sort that knocks a server over. Usually, servers actually get unhappy over a period of time, and so you can detect those things ahead of time. For example, backup drives don't usually instantly fill. They end up full. they make it to full. you upload some data, and then tomorrow you upload more data, and eventually, the backups are too large, and so your backup drive is full. Okay, well, that didn't just happen yesterday. That was a process that built up over the last week or month or whatever the time period is. And so, if you're collecting data every so often on that server, and this is one way to do it. There's a whole bunch of industry standard software for doing things like this. The problem I've had with most of that industry standard software is absolutely none of it supports FileMaker. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know how to gather data from it. I can teach some of it. Famously, I think actually Claris built templates some years ago for Zabbix. For those of you who know that metrics collection system.
Yep, Zabbix. What happened with that? I mean, people still using it or what?
Yeah, it works fine. I found it to be basically like way too high powered, and I'll say too flexible, but I mean that in a bad way, because it has every option. Because it's an industry standard thing, and people are trying to run it with tens of thousands of different kinds of software, and so it totally makes sense that you would make it the most flexible possible because it needs to deal with all of those different use cases. I need about 5 things from the server. So, there's a whole bunch of stuff that it collects, and it's totally awesome. Just to be clear, like I have no complaints actually, but it's too much. It's too big of a gun, and so I came back to that and said, well, we should do that eventually, and came back to it and built this, which is basically the things that we actually need. So you guys have seen stuff like this before. You can gather a time. This is a cool demonstration of things that you can do in PowerShell that are neat. So we've seen the get date before. But get date has functions in it, like a universal time, which is like UTC. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking the current date when the script runs, I'm turning it into universal time, which is UTC time zone, and then I'm turning it into a time, like a string, right? A date stamp or whatever, formatted in this way. So month, day, year, hour, minute, second. As a note, basically, this is the format that FileMaker uses for its date fields. If you're US, time zone or whatever. And so what this does is that, we grab the time, we come here, we look at basically the key. We're just using this. It's like where did the backups go for the server? I figured that was a neat and cute way to have a unique key for each server, because each server has a unique backup location. That's a thing that I can not 100% of the time, but 99.99% of the time depend on, that each server will have its own unique backup location. And if you don't have one because you're not uploading to S3, you can just put a unique string in there. It doesn't actually care. It's just something to put in the data. And then we come down, and so there's basically 3 things. So there's one thing that is actually really neat that PowerShell can do, which is collect performance counters. Those are a thing that's built into Windows, where and you can tell what each of these things are, right? Like, they're very well labeled. These come from FileMaker Server directly. And so if you go poke FileMaker Server and you say, hey, I need FileMaker Server 19/open databases, that gives you what it sounds like. It gives you the current count of open databases on the FileMaker Server. FileMaker Server is reporting that data into Windows. Windows has its own kind of metrics, sampling, collection, etc. system. If you didn't know that, I can tell you that that's a thing. That is also what things like Zabbix collect from. They do real-time sampling and you can say, hey, Zabbix, give me this number, and it'll give you the most recent one that it had and stuff like that. Really useful. So what we do here is we collect, this is the FileMaker server stuff. And so we collect up things that are explicitly FileMaker server numbers. And this includes stuff here at the end, like you can see the cache unsaved percent and the cache hit percent. Those are really important performance details. And also things like, FileMaker server, how much is it writing or reading from the hard drive and stuff like that, which can give you each of those things kind of individually doesn't matter, but in combination with the other numbers, they can give you a somewhat of a picture of how the server is feeling right now. And I say that feeling like servers can get overloaded. That doesn't mean that it's even underspecified. It just may mean that you had 12 people request a report, and like the server's unhappy right now because it's trying to generate 12 reports at the same time. You can end up in situations like that. And so you'll see stuff like that in your numbers where everything's spiked up, but also you can see, oh yeah, there's 12 reports running right now. Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
So Labo404 posted the Soliant Zabbix blog, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's where I pulled that stuff from originally, actually. I think we did that in late 2018.
Yeah, we looked at that, and so you decided it was overwhelmingly too much.
Yeah, it just ended up being too much. It was a pain to try and figure out. So the challenge I had with Zabbix, and it's not a criticism of the project because it does what it does, and it does it pretty well, which is why it's industry standard. It's kind of a pain to actually get everything up and working and configured, and then you can look at the data, and then what do we do with that? It's going to end up being basically the same thing as what I built. The difference is I built this stuff in, I don't know, maybe 8 hours total. Okay. Like from the start completely. So
and you rolled your own is what you're saying. So.
Correct. Yeah. And so there, you can make arguments for or against that. If you were collecting metrics about things that were not FileMaker also, you have a mixed scenario. You've got, I don't know, MySQL servers or something else going, you're doing other stuff as well. You might just put everything on Zabbix and say, that's fine, like whatever. For this, we really only do FileMaker, so it was a perfect solution. If we, if we expanded what RCC does, then we might just switch back over to something like Zabbix.
Yeah, I mean, it's just one sort of thing. So it's not so much an example of to use Zabbix or not. The question is how you basically use PowerShell to collect the metrics and to basically,
Yep. And so, I'll say there's a couple of these things that are interesting in here that they're cool. Y'all can see, processor percent, how much RAM are we using right now, whatever. These are neat because these actually detect problems. So. That's not what they look like, obviously. That's not what they're labeled. This is like if the FileMaker server process, what percent processor is it using right now? So if you see that it's, 1%, 0%, 25%, nobody cares. If it's 100, your FMS has consumed all of the CPU on your system.
Yeah.
Consider that. And if you're running a script right now, okay. And if it only lasts for a couple seconds, maybe that's fine, right? But if it continues, you may have something running off the rails. And so FM server is that. You have FM SASE. That's your scheduled scripts and your PSOS. This one actually is one of our Sorry, I keep clicking on the wrong one. This one is the source of one of our alerts at RCC, actually. The helper process is like they call it the angel. It's actually what handles the logging from FileMaker server or SASE or whatever process is running. And so if you should get a processor time of approximately 0 for that thing every time. If it's higher than that, maybe there's something weird going on. But if it's blank, there's something wrong. And what that means is the helper process is not running and your server is headless currently. And so from a metric reading that theoretically is supposed to be just a super basic, I'm just collecting the percents and this thing and the kilobytes per seconds and whatever, just little basic details here that we might want to look at. You can determine a potentially very unhappy server or a server that's gotten itself into a situation and the human needs to come help. Yeah. And you can see that very, very immediately, like literally if that thing's blank, One of the things that I haven't built this yet, but one of the things that we're going to do is have that alert somebody, a Slack message or an email or something like that. When our thing scans through and sees, oop, someone's FMS helper isn't running. That's a problem. Alert, alert the human.
Yep. That's a good one. Well, I mean, we got to probably kind of land the plane. We're kind of past time right now, but obviously we could talk about more of this tomorrow. We're going to talk about this kind of from the Mac standpoint tomorrow. Are you have the same thing on the Mac, or what are we doing on the Mac?
No, we actually don't have the same thing on the Mac. Most of our Macs sit just running.
Yeah.
We can talk about similar things though. From the perspective, so I have to see if there's metrics collections on Macs, because we might actually be able to reproduce something like that. I haven't looked at that.
We don't use a lot of Mac servers. I mean, I personally use a ton of Mac machines. Most of my engineers do. But in terms of the server deployments, we're primarily using Amazon, which means that we're stuck on Linux or on Windows.
Windows. And it's mostly been Windows for the most part. Every time I talk about it, everybody always asks if we can host Macs on Amazon. The technical answer to that question is yes, but they're meant for like build servers and stuff. So I think they start at $2 an hour, and you're not allowed to reserve them for less than like 12 at a time. So sure, if you want to pay like $48 a day for your Mac Mini server, you can write checks. That's your business decision. But I wouldn't.
Well, we'll want to revisit that tomorrow, because the people ask that again tomorrow. So we'll do that. All right, everyone. Good luck. We'll see you tomorrow. Reminder that the upcoming broadcast schedule, you go to fmtrain.tv, press the live button, or make sure you support the channel by pressing the bundle button and then buying one of our bundles or renewing it. We greatly appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. See ya.
Just stepped up the whole way. Calm, cool, collected. The quarterback, great read, good patience. More importantly, great job up front protecting this quarterback to give you a chance. And that's all you can ask for.
Try to rally down 10. 9:25 to go here in the fourth. Short motion by Amendola from the left. Brady takes the shotgun snap, stands in, throws it left for Amendola, reaches up and snacks a high throw and lands inside the 10, rolling to the 9. Ball slightly behind him, but Danny makes the grab.